All right, folks, I guess with that 2:15, I was told to start exactly at 2:15, so that's what I will do. Welcome everyone that is new to this room. My name is Gil Shalev. I work with CITL. I'm an instructional designer, and I will be the social moderator for this session, which runs from 2:15 to 3:15. This is our second Spark an Idea gathering, and we have three what looks like very fascinating talks. We have Baby Steps, a Roadmap to Teaching with the OERs, by Erin Alcock from Public Services of QE2. We have Ian Gibson, my colleague from CITL, presenting on the Fusion Project, Future Skills Development and Learner Career Readiness. And finally, we have Writing-Enriched Curriculum, Adapting a Professional Development and Curricular Initiative by Melanie Doyl and Alan Best, also my fellow colleagues at CITL. So thank you, everyone. A reminder, this is for WebEx folks. I don't know if we have many WebEx folks. Please mute your mics until we take a Q&A. We have 3 sessions, 20 minutes, 10 to 12-ish minutes of speaking, and about 5 minutes for Q&A. And this will conclude at 3:15. So thank you, everyone. Again, it will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel after the conference. So we will start, and please join me in welcoming Erin Alcock.
Very quick outline of what I'm going to talk about. These are the baby steps, so just a bit of an introduction, a bit of information about what is an OER, how could I possibly start, where can I find out more, and oh, I've heard there are grants. I'm going to talk about So as Gil said, my name is Erin Alcock. I'm a science research liaison librarian and currently the head of public services in the QE2 library. I've been working at Memorial since 2007. I have been interested in open educational resources since joining a Open Educational Resource Advisory Committee, which used to be called the Open Educational Resource Working Group, via the Council of Atlantic Academic Libraries, or CAL. So CAL is a consortium of all of or most of the academic libraries in Atlantic Canada. And one of the things that they do is license scholarly content to the university. So a fair proportion of the books and journals that ebooks, I should say, and journals that we have in our libraries come to us through national and regional consortiums. So additionally, CAL does things like have us collaborate on things like copyright, research data management, document delivery, a lot of the stuff that we all kind of do in common. And since 2021, they've had this working group working on hoping that people will consider creating, adopting, or adapting open educational resources in post-secondary institutions in the area. So what is an OER, and why should we care? I'll read you this quick definition, or this quote. OERs are teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. Open educational resources include full courses, course materials, modules, textbooks, streaming videos, test software, and many other tools, materials, or techniques that are used to support access to knowledge. OERs are part of the larger movement of open education that seeks to remove barriers, mostly to students. Okay, whoop, went too far. Okay, so it's probably pretty clear how this is a benefit to students. Their stuff for their courses is free and accessible, so yay, right? Insert all the research about how finding ways to reduce student stress and increases their chance of success here, right? But they can also have benefits to instructors. So you can provide a lot of flexibility in terms of course design, and you can tailor the content to exactly what you want. So now this is my professor who's having a moment of whoa, because maybe you're all thinking, well, yes, a textbook that is exactly what I need sounds wonderful, but where exactly am I supposed to find the time to create that? Granted, creating a book from scratch to support your teaching is a huge task, and you can get support to do that. But the point of open educational resources, as far as I see it, is that the licenses that they tend to have and that they should have lend themselves well to adopting and adapting, right? So you don't need to start from scratch and create an entire new work. It would be a pretty big leap to create a brand new textbook from scratch, although maybe some of you have done it. But you can take a textbook that already exists in an OER network. You can use it as it is. You can adapt it based on your needs. You can take more than one OER and combine it into one OER. And in some cases, you can take a commercial textbook and migrate it to an open license if you have all the proper copyright permissions. So there are details there that you have to sort out. It's not quite super straightforward, but that's that is a thing that you can do. So, you know, the baby step might be to try one, use an open educational resource that's been developed in your subject area, see what the students think, and then, you know, consider moving along. How do I actually do it? So CAL, the Council of Atlantic Academic Libraries that I mentioned earlier, has provides us access to a tool called Pressbooks. So Pressbooks is a digital authoring and publishing platform. So in the first few years, since 2021, when this first committee was first established, CAL had a somewhat limited license to this tool called Pressbooks. But last year, all of the Atlantic provinces, through something called the Council of Atlantic Ministers of Education and Training, or CAMET, threw a pile of money at this project for a pilot project that enhances our Pressbooks license. So we have an unlimited license now for the Atlantic region. It enhanced the OER development grant program, more on that in a minute, and it also facilitates the Atlantic OER Advisory Committee in developing a peer review process for the OERs and network. So that's something that's still in progress, the idea of peer reviewing these resources. And maybe not incidentally, I feel like it's worth noting that quite a lot of OERs are reviewed and peer reviewed in some ways. I kind of harken back to, I've been around long enough to remember when people were outraged at the idea of open access journals, and it was just self-published drivel, and why would we ever use that? So OERs in the book form are generally written by subject specialists and academics. And, you know, if you're finding them in a reputable source, they're generally going to be reputable too. Okay. So Pressbooks isn't the only tool for making an OER. I mean, you can post your PowerPoint slides everywhere. And, you know, if you talk to Dr. Dave Churchill, who was in the Birds of a Feather session, you could just put your courses up online, and there's all kinds of ways to share things. But Pressbooks is a tool that kind of facilitates what might look like a traditional textbook, but it has a lot of plugins and a lot of features that make for interactivity, etc. So it works with plugins for things like these. So Hypothesis is an annotation tool that'll allow the student to annotate the book that they're working with. MathJax is a JavaScript library that helps with the display of mathematical equations and things like that. If anybody works with computer sciences or math or engineering, you often know that it's not always easy to have that type of stuff on a web page or on something online. TablePress is like pretty self-explanatory. It makes the tables nicer. So yeah. Has anybody seen that meme lately where a lady, she moves her coffee table and all of her furniture goes up on the ceiling, like in the old days with Word, if you hit enter and your whole, anyway, you know.
In the current days.
Yeah. So it also integrates really well with H5P. So that's something that's to input interactive elements into your Pressbook. Videos too. So a couple of us were talking about that this morning in the Birds of a Feather session. So you can have videos in your Pressbook as well. And it tracks all your usage with Google Analytics. So I have some screenshots here, and I'm not going to hop out to the web just kind of for simplicity. But so the next thing is like, so hey, I want more. Where do I go? So on the library website, if you navigate down, and again, please get in touch if you'd like sort of some of these links or some more information. That's kind of one of the themes. We have a guide to open textbooks, and on this guide, it highlights a couple of memorial OERs that already exists. There on the side, it links you out to where you can create an open textbook, where you can kind of get a Pressbooks account. And it also, sort of further down the page, you'll just have to trust me on that, it links to a bunch of repositories from across Canada, where you can sort of browse through a whole bunch of different OERs. BC Campus and eCampus Ontario are some of the larger repositories, which makes sense. And they, this is a screenshot from what BC Campus the BC Campus Open Collection looks like. And many of them are similar to this, of course. You can search or you can browse based on subject areas. They generally have features inside, facets that allow you to filter by education level, icons for if they're reviewed, things like that, right? So you can kind of like navigate your way on through and see what already exists that might be relevant to you. Here's, oh, that's right, there's a screenshot for one particular book within the BC Open collection, and I brought it up because it does kind of contain a review, and there's all kinds of information there too about if a student needed a hard copy, if a student needed alternate formats, things like that. Accessibility is a pretty big deal with open educational resources, so that tends to be all like really up front. Okay. All right, and then back to the Atlantic OER network. So the Atlantic OER network is on the side here, find and open textbooks. There are two options. You can go into the full Pressbooks, everything that Pressbooks has, and you can search through there. And you can also search through just the Atlantic region. If for some reason you're just kind of curious about what's going on at Dell, what's going on UPEI, et cetera, and you can sort of see what's available close by. Maybe you have colleagues that you were aware of. And I just wanted to highlight quickly, here's one OER that's being used on campus now. So this is being used in first year psychology. I think maybe not every section of first year psychology, but a number of sections of first year psychology. Developed by Dr. Cheryl Fitzpatrick and Dr. Christina Thorpe. And so they adapted this book from another work, and they've been using it, I think, relatively successfully. The students seem to appreciate it. And then quickly too, this is a screenshot of the back end. So this is the dashboard for the same book, sort of showing you all the different ways that you could edit and bring things in and things like that. It's a pretty basic WYSIWYG kind of a thing. Like it's not too difficult of a thing to use. You know, it has its quirks, but what doesn't, right? So that's sort of how you would use that. So if you were interested in trying this, you come back to this page, and if I was able to scroll, I could show you a link where you would request an account. All of the Atlantic OER stuff is facilitated out of, well, with a person actually, a librarian. She worked here for a while. Her name is Alexandra Macascio, and she will get you an account. She will also send you Pressbook about Pressbooks, and you can read this. This is the user guide and all the bells and whistles and how it will all work, and how things all kind of come together. And then lastly, she'll also send you, prior to her getting her DGET call, she worked at the University of Guelph as an OER librarian, and she developed a very, very extensive guide about all the different ways you can make your Pressbook accessible. So this is quite lengthy, and she continues to share this with everybody because it is a very, very useful thing. So I've mentioned accessibility a couple of times, and that's relatively important, and particularly important if you are interested in applying for an Atlantic OER grant. Okay, so there are grants, and they come out annually. They've been doing this every year since 2021. The grants are tiered, so there's a $7,000 grant for people who are making a brand new Pressbook or a brand new OER. And in fact, it doesn't have to be a Pressbook. It could be a number of other things. It's $4,000 as the maximum for an adaptation. And there's a $1,000 grant available to people who are possibly just creating like ancillary materials and things that will support their teaching. There's a whole bunch of information on the Atlantic OER website about how that works, and including the criteria and just everything about the process. And you'll see, you can click through to read the successful applicants for the last number of years. You'll see too that since the CanMet funding, we gave out 9 awards this past year. In previous years, there's only been about 5 or 6. So it's been a really big take up, but not a whole heck of a lot of applicants from Memorial University of Newfoundland, which is kind of why I'm here. All right, so I'm talking really fast, and I know that, but I don't want to run out of time. So the baby steps. We all get pretty comfortable with our teaching materials and things like that, but maybe poke around, see what's out there. Maybe there's something that exists that can be useful and that your students can use. It doesn't really even need to be your primary textbook. Maybe just add it to your reading list. You could also adapt an OER. You could take something, right? The classic example is a chemistry book that is published in the US. Well, make the units all work in Canada, and then it'll work for you. Continue to adapt, right? These things can be kind of living documents. You can kind of tweak and keep going, and you can always sort of make changes that suit your students. And then lastly, you could possibly, if you have tons and tons of time, create a new OER. And someone like me, several of my other colleagues, lots of colleagues across Atlantic Canada are available, including the staff at call. Questions?
Excellent, thank you so much. You have about 5-ish minutes or so for questions, and WebEx folks as well, if you want to ask something, just type away or unmute your mic. So yeah, if anyone wants to ask anything for Erin, please, now's the time. Any suggestions, questions, queries? Yes, please.
First year psychology was my worst course, and they used to ask questions like, potato is to a tomato as hindsight bias is to, and you had to try to figure out what it was. So I'm going to ask you a similarly unfair question. How is OER like Creative Commons?
That is a good one. Most OERs, in fact, like if you want to get an OER grant from the Atlantic OER, you do have to apply a Creative Commons license to your OER. So you would generally apply as open a Creative Commons license as possible, because you want, if you're putting one out there, you want it to also be adapted and shared. So they're quite related. There's some exceptions. I think, they're in the Atlantic network. There are a couple of OERs that are created with some Indigenous knowledge embedded in them, and they're not necessarily meant to be shared. So they don't have a Creative Commons license in quite the same way. They have one of the varieties, but they're very closely related.
Because I know some of the Creative Commons licenses say specifically no remixes, for example.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And then from what I could see there, you could remix anything that you wanted. So
Well, you'd have to kind of look at each OER, and any of those repositories should sort of list exactly what's allowed. So yeah, you'd have to look at that.
Excellent. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Thanks, Erin. So for me, this is an introduction to the whole idea and the topic. Is there sort of a version 2.0 or 3.0 to take exactly through the possibilities as a workshop or?
Possibly. So I guess yes. I mean, I guess the answer would be to get in touch with me, and we can arrange something like that to sort of look at the more of the nitty gritty.
On board and a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've been talking with Ruth Hickey through CITL too, and she'd like something like that, like maybe in the fall and et cetera. So yeah, so either get in touch or stay tuned.
Anyone else? Are any of these links available at the QE2?
Yes, yeah. So the link for one of our guides, and I was, procrastinating and last minute editing, but I can make sure to include the links where I can. Yeah, in the slides.
So, anyone else? No? Good. Well, thank you so much. I have no idea how amazing it is, but I'm told it's amazing.
Let's go with it.
And thank you, everyone. Again, there's some bottles of water and other assorted snacks over here. We'll take a minute or so, and Ian Gibson is going to speak to us about the Fusion project. All right, Ian, floor is yours. Begin whenever you wish.
Thank you. Okay, great. As Gil pointed out before, my talk today is titled Future Skills Development and Learner Career Readiness, though I just wanted a slightly more academically acceptable sounding title than Fusion. And some of you have probably seen this around and are peripherally aware of what it is, or at least that it exists. So what I want to do today is the following two fairly straightforward things. First, give you a sense of what Fusion is. I know you've probably seen this brand something around, as well as how it's currently being used at Memorial. And secondly, and I hope more importantly, see how it's currently being implemented in an academic course, how it can be implemented in an academic course, and potentially, if you're an instructor and so inclined, how it might be implemented in your own academic. So I'll get past some of the background information on this quickly before I get into how it's being used in courses. Like Future Skills Innovation Network is what Fusion stands for. It's an acronym. This is by no means a new program, so I don't know if any of you are going to be familiar with the iteration of this that landed at MUN in 2020, 2021. You'll be forgiven for not being familiar with that. It sort of landed during COVID and it wrapped around USEP. We reached about somewhere between 100 and 150 students. My colleague, well, our colleague at CITL, Keith Power, ran it then. It's a grant-funded program through Employment Social Development Canada based in developing student skills. We now have funding to go ahead for, my position started in July of last year, so we're almost at a year, but we're going ahead through into next year and hopefully getting further grant funding to keep doing this program. It's a collaborative effort between 5 universities. This is not just happening here. There's a project lead like me at one of the following, at each of the following universities listed. So it's us, Carleton, Concordia, USask, and UCalgary. The idea behind this, the impetus behind this program, was the fact that so many students would come out of undergraduate programs, especially, but in some cases graduate programs, just lacking these kinds of general, we think of as soft skills They would go into the workplace and their employers would say, well, you can't do this thing, or you can't do this thing, or you can't do that thing. And at some point, I think in 2018, the government of Canada put together this model called Skills for Success, where they polled employers and said, what are you not seeing and what would you like to see? What is your ideal new recruit, new hire out of an undergraduate program or graduate program? And they came up with this list of 9 skills attributes, from which almost directly Fusion has drawn its own skill development modules. There's, in some cases, there are one-to-one modules, like we have one for collaboration, we have one for adaptability. Some we've opted to avoid. There's not a numeracy one or a writing one, because often schools will cover these kinds of things in ways that you might imagine through math courses or through, in our cases, the intro CRW courses. So the modules themselves that we have are 10. They're there. I won't name them all off. There will be 13 by the end of the calendar year. The 3 still to come are one on creativity, one on innovation, and one that's harder to pin down, but we're tentatively calling it flourishing or well-being. That's kind of a continuation of the self-management module. So each one of these can be done in Brightspace and takes somewhere between 3 and 4 hours for a student to complete entire. They can't, I mean, it's hard to police this sort of thing. Students will often just go in and work 3 hours flat or 4 hours flat, complete the module and submit what they need to submit. We recommend that they divide everything up into 3 separate sections because each module is so divided. There are 3 phases. The first is called the explore phase, where the student kind of learns what the skill is, what it means to collaborate, and some associated sub-skills to do with that, for instance. Then we hope that they take a little break and do the apply phase, which involves taking what it is that they know or have learned from the explore phase and applying that in the context of some applied learning experience. We use this term very broadly to refer to just about anything a student is doing. So it might be a volunteer experience, it might be a co-op placement, it might be an entire academic class or some portion of an academic class. And then finally, there's the reflect phase, where the student is asked some questions about how the experience of applying their skill in context went. They're asked to go back over that and say, this went well or this went poorly, and sort of make a plan for how, and this is maybe the most important part of the program, how they see themselves using this skill in the future, in their future work life, academic life, or just life generally. And this is kind of what's missing, I think, in academic programs generally. These kinds of skills we take for granted, but they're not necessarily explicitly developed in students. And so they come out of, say, a humanities program without being able to do any number of these different things. You might be wondering to yourself, what does this look like in practice? What are you talking about? So this all exists on Brightspace. They're in, I sort of call them slide decks. They're not built in PowerPoint, they're built in Storyline Articulate. So there are a number of different varieties of slide types to keep students engaged in going through this in the Brightspace shell. In some cases, there are just static text slides, but there are also video slides. There are some that ask students to click through different buttons, button content, to get to the next slides. There are some interactive kind of text input slides where students will be asked to reply to a query, and then in the next slide, see how they did or edit that or go back. And then finally, each one has kind of like a pre and post assessment thing. So if you're doing the communication module, say, at the start of it, you'll be asked a series of these questions on the scale of never to always, just to get the student's sense by self-report of how well they think they're able to communicate. And then toward the end of the module, they're asked to return to that answer to those same questions. What we tend to find is that students have gotten worse, or it seems that they've gotten worse, but in actual fact, they've just learned, oh, I was not very good at this skill. I didn't have this skill the way that I thought I did, which has kind of been an interesting exercise in knowing that across the board as everyone does this. So I have 2 versions of this running on campus. It's all the same material. I conceptualize it to myself and according to these 2 different things. One is co-curricular. This is the broad-based Fusion program that any student can opt into if they have a Brightspace account. They go in via a self-enrollment module that you may have seen on posters up around campus. So there's a little QR code. This is the way that most people end up getting in, or through our website. We offer a small financial incentive, which is part of the grant funding. When they finish their first module, they get $75 for having done that, and then beyond that, it would be ridiculous and not sustainable, and so they're on. And that's just that one small financial incentive. They work at their own pace, although the asterisk to that is after a term without any movement on the Brightspace page. If I've seen that a student hasn't done anything, they get booted out and they have to enroll again. And as I've said, they work on this alongside their other programs or opportunities that they're involved in, volunteer experiences, job placements, the like. There are some, so I had 450 here, but it's slowly ticking up. So we're at about 470 students that are enrolled in this opt-in version of the program campus-wide now. And this is like the larger version of Fusion that I'm less here to talk to you about than I am the second, which is the curricular version of Fusion. So in this version, usually one of the modules from the main Brightspace page is imported into an instructor's Brightspace page for their course and done through that course for some small grade. The implementations that I've done, and we did the curricular version for the first time this past term, involved a Fusion module for, say, 3 or 4% of the final grade in the course. The instructor sets the time frame for completion, whether the student does it right up front very quickly or at the end very quickly, or spreads the module out over the entire term or even a month. It's up to them, and this is the sort of thing that I'm happy to consult with people on to see how it is that they want to use the module on their course. Usually it wraps around an assignment in the course, but it can wrap around the course writ large. We ran this in kind of 5 courses in the midterm this past as a trial and reached about 150 students. So not huge enrollment classes, but I since have quite a lot of interest, especially for the upcoming fall term, but a little bit for the summer term. So we're getting a sense of how it's working in classes now, and it seems to be fairly successful. These are not all 5, obviously, but 3 of the examples of how it worked in the previous semester. So I had a research methods and sociology class that ran Fusion, a marine biology class, and a process engineering class. So in the research methods and sociology class, students did the AI literacy module for a small grade upfront in the class. The idea being that, oh, this is a research methods class, you're going to be engaged in a great deal of research. It makes sense for the student to plow through this AI literacy content so they get at least some sense of what it is that they should and shouldn't be doing in their later research in the class. The marine biology class was interesting in that it was technically optional, the module that was used, but the student could pick any 7 out of 9 assignments, and the Fusion module was one of those assignments. So it still counted as a participation grade in that course. That was the adaptability module. And the process engineering class had used the collaboration module for grades, but had like a student group work project at the end of the term. And so alongside that, while the students were working on the content of that course, the process engineering course, they were to work through this collaboration module as well and reflect on how, if and how, they were gaining this worthwhile skill at the same time. So while they were doing that, they were asked to think about it and kind of encode that skill for later, and then they would have something to show for it as well. The grading metric for this is a student workbook document that comes with each module, which amounts to students filling out kind of short answer responses alongside the module as they're working through. It doesn't need to just be that document. And if any instructor is interested, I work with them to determine, does this need to be a simple rubric that just marks that workbook document? Can it be a longer written response or an essay or a quiz? I have one instructor who's interested in using this and having the apply phase, the second phase of the module, function as a full course in class discussion, just so that students can talk to each other about some of the content they're working on. So this is truly up to any instructor how it is that they want to grade this thing, and that's kind of what I'm here for in my association with CITL. It's like this is the pedagogy angle on all of this. They use make sure I'm okay for time. To start using the module in your own class, it's very simple. First, and I'll show you a link to do this if you're so interested, is check out the modules for yourselves. There's a website, MUNTLC25, but I'll have a QR code up here in a second. You can also auto-enroll through the website if you have access to MUN Brightspace. I'm sure everyone here does. You can go in and take a look. After that, it's a matter of emailing me to discuss evaluative methods, whether simple or more complex. This is a large part of what my job is involved with. And then the nitty gritty of it is just requesting via my dashboard on Brightspace that I'm granted and with enhanced CA access to the course. And then I can go in and copy the module of your choosing over to your course and sort of have at it from there. So it's a ludicrously simple process. And from emailing me to getting the module in your course is something like 24 hours or as quick as I can. I mean, it's within the day. So it's not an involved process. These I will skip in the interest. These are some survey results and a student quote that are all very glowing. But this is the QR code. If you like and are technologically savvy, I don't know how to use a QR code, as I'm sure you'll know. But you can, as I say, go to mun.ca/fusion, and there's a little auto enroll button at the bottom of the first page if you want to check out these modules and learn a bit more about it. So yeah, thanks for listening to me.
So thank you so much. Hey, folks, as before, we have roughly 5-ish minutes. If folks have some questions or queries, etc., from about the Fusion project, anyone? Yes.
Actually, I have two questions. One, as a student, I wanted to enroll to Fusion. Like I was curious, and I didn't have time the whole semester. And the moment that I have actual time, it said, "Oh, you're done. You're not. You should join again." So I think I still can access, but just like considering that the student have a lot of other works to do, so maybe just extend that time. I don't know the policy, but
That's fair. So this is my more threatening one. I actually gave them 2 terms most recently, and I've narrowed it down to 1 because I had a lot of people who were hanging. So in practice, I'm going to kick the people out who have been in for 2 terms and take your comment into account because that's fair. And I'm now at the end of term. You're quite right, getting a lot of I think panicked submissions of people. Oh my God, I'm going to get thrown in. Yeah, that's fair.
And the second question, as a peer course instructor, so I was like, do you have something about? I think it's AI literacy is interesting. Another thing, do you have any module around citation and referencing? Because I found that undergrad students don't know how to do it, and then usually I use that for finding if they use generative AI, and I always feel that they don't know at the same time that they should know, and then it's just it's
no. I mean, the simple answer is no, but I tend to think that this sort of thing is useful. And the more you look at these skills, the more I think more skills, and they get kind of more specific. So I think it's an interesting dance where you're trying to keep them at the level of broad enough that they can still wrap around something. And I think the citation styles thing, as much as I think there should be, it's a separate course on this kind of thing, would probably be a little too specific for the scope of this.
It's not a part of AI literacy.
No.
Yes, please, Wendy.
If you copy a piece, a module into a course, does the instructor of that course, can they then, do they have the rights to modify it in any way, or is it wholesale?
So this is stuff we're discussing as a collective, is how much room there is to modify them. And the answer is we want to give people the leeway to modify them, but it depends on if they have the software and there's form files, so they're a bit finicky to modify. So to date, most of the modification has been done in how it's graded and outside of the module itself and how it's presented and everything.
So is that something we could work with you on if we wanted modification?
Yes, yeah.
Much, do you find that the material is both undergraduate and graduate student?
Yes, it is. So it's pitched in such a way that anyone can work through it. So there's a little exit survey at the end of every module, and so many people filled it out. There's no threat of them doing it or not doing it. But I was kind of blown away how many people opted in to do this that were master's students, because I thought a lot of these things would be germane to first-year university students, like undergrad students. But mostly master's and PhD students. I guess some keeners from first and second year undergrad.
And thank you so much. So if there are any undergrad courses which are similar in other universities which are on board with this, then can the students chat with those students or something similar to that? Is there any feature like that you have, or it is just to one?
No, this is an excellent point, but basically the only reason we don't have that is I think it would just be difficult. It's hard enough for me to communicate via Microsoft Teams with my Carleton colleague just because the systems seem to hate each other.
So because many universities, I just said 5 are using this, right? So in case if there are similar type of courses, especially chemistry or physics, which other universities are also having the same type of courses, and if the students can have that some type of interaction where they can know or something like that with these things, that is what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any, as far as I know, unless any of my colleagues are doing that, we don't have anything like that, but it's something I will look into. It's a good point.
Yeah, please.
What happens if 2 undergraduate students are given the same module by 2 different instructors, 2 different courses?
Yeah, I've had that question a couple times and we haven't run into it yet. It would be a nice problem to have. The current solution is something like that doctor's note where, let's say like I've already completed this in my course and the instructor will sign off on that, or I'll sign off on that because I have access to the courses too, and they're able to say, oh, this student showed up a second time.
But the way it runs in Brightspace, it wouldn't be such that the student does all the work and it just gets registered for both courses. It would be 2 separate shells or 2 separate sets of submissions to be acquired if they had to do both.
Yeah, so so it's like some record keeping in the back end. I'm in the back end, keeping track of a huge list of student names and see if they show up again.
I have a slight follow-up to that. So with that group of 5 universities, are they all using it via Brightspace? Or something like Brightspace?
Yeah, right, or Moodle, I think is one of them, this versions of the same.
But the course structure that you showed us is more or less the same with slides and answering questions.
Yeah.
Why only those 5 universities? Is it closed or anyone can join?
I think those were the universities that signed up in the first place, and we have interest from other universities and are already trying to broaden it. So if we get funding to continue this, I think U of T is interested and McMaster is interested. And I can't remember, it's Breakthrough College or something. It's like it's expanding. We're trying to figure out how to get this to more people.
Yes.
So currently can be embedded in courses. Have you thought about embedding it for student employment opportunities on campus? We employ a lot of students, so a 3 to 4 hour commitment to actually connect that skill with what we require them to do in the workplace. I could see a lot of value in that as well.
Yeah, so
efforts are valued, right? Their motivation.
I think somebody needs to mute themselves on WebEx.
So not embedded. There's no reason it's not embedded at the moment, but it can be. I mean, this is kind of what happened with the first iteration in 2021. They say it was through USEC, and so that was a mandatory thing. So I don't have any mandatory curricular applications for this now, but yes, it absolutely can be.
Good. Okay, thank you so much, Ian. That was excellent. Thank you. Folks, so for this, thank you again, Ian, for this last session. We have Writing-Enriched Curriculum, Adapting a Professional Development and Curricular Initiative. Melanie Doyl, ED at CITL, my colleague, and Carolyn Best, Writing Center Manager, Center for Innovation, Teaching and Learning as well.
Yeah, sure.
Move down.
Welcome, folks. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Gil. As Gil said, we're here today to talk about the Writing-Enriched Curriculum, which is a fairly popular model out of the US, meant to better embed writing instruction across a academic program. So a little bit of context to start, I guess, on the state of writing or writing instruction at universities. I think we'd all likely agree that writing is fairly foundational to much of what goes on in higher education. It's not only a means of demonstrating knowledge and communicating ideas, but also really centrally tied to how we critically think about concepts, how we develop disciplinary knowledge, and how we engage in scholarly and professional communication. Despite some of this prevalence and innate role in universities, writing is increasingly facing somewhat of a threat on university campuses in terms of the way it is positioned, valued, and seen. Not specific to Memorial, of course, but budget cuts, austerity measures are facing all higher education across North America, and writing is often vulnerable in those cases. Writing courses are often kind of the first to go, as they often seem as extra, as opposed to kind of centrally tied to disciplinary knowledge. Sometimes this often looks like increasing class sizes in early writing courses, like first-year writing courses, our CRW courses. the casualization of writing instruction, more PCIs teaching these sorts of courses, the displacement of writing pedagogy expertise, it's kind of being buried within other units or deprofessionalized in some way, and eventually just the cut of those sorts of courses. So much content to get through in the program that the writing course, maybe that's not necessary. And all of this knowledge is kind of shaped by the field of writing studies itself. So although all disciplines engage in writing to some extent, writing studies is its own long-standing field that we can look to better understand some of these experiences, which is where the work Helen and I are speaking to today comes from. So in light of some of those threats that I briefly described, Carolyn and I see the Writing-Enriched Curriculum model as a potential antidote, maybe, or one of many antidotes to this problem. It's essentially a facilitated process designed to support the integration of relevant writing and writing instruction into departmental curricula and to increase the rate at which students' writing meets local faculty expectations. So essentially, it develops departments, faculties or departments, working with a writing studies professional like Carolyn or myself to help articulate the type of writing valued and needed within specific disciplines and departments. Folks like I help faculties and departments kind of draw out that tacit knowledge around writing that is key to individual disciplines and better map and identify places in program curricula where writing instruction is needed and how that might be taught, assessed, and built upon. This happens over time across a program rather than just in these kind of first-year writing courses, which are often seen as somewhat of an inoculation attempt. Get them early when they first come in, they'll know how to write, but that's of course not how writing development happens. It's over time. So this model grew out of the writing across the curriculum movement, which has been around the United States since the 70s or 80s, really. And it's built upon the foundational idea that writing instruction is everybody's responsibility. It's not just something that takes place in English departments or communication departments, but really something that every academic discipline needs to be teaching. Because of course there are unique ways of writing at the university. Writing required in an English department vary from sociology to nursing to business to engineering and so on. So while WEC, as it's often referred to, does have its roots in the WAC movement, the writing across the curriculum, it's often seen as a more sustainable approach to writing development for a few reasons, partially because it is really tied to individual departments. So your individual departments kind of build capacity within their faculty to look at their existing programs rather than needing support from an outside WAC sort of office. So it's not an external unit that is doing the work as opposed to the department themselves looking at their own program, their own curriculum map, and so on. And it's also essentially to tie to that department's knowledge and their own views of what it means to write in that department, in that discipline. There's no top-down view of what it means to write at the university. It's what does it mean to write in Memorial's, business faculty or Memorial's political science department. So now, thanks. There are a few, I guess, kind of main features of this, the WEC model, the Writing-Enriched Curriculum model, as articulated here by Pam Flash, who is, I guess maybe the foremother of this model. They are, the locus in that it takes place within individual departments and disciplines rather than a standalone unit. It is always conceptually oriented towards writing and identifying those kind of tacit assumptions about writing and writing instruction. It's data-driven in that a lot of this process through meetings, looks at student writing in your department, what the types of writing students are producing, what assignments are used, what the rubrics are to assess those. It's a mediated process, again, facilitated by someone external like myself or Carolyn. So you have that someone outside the discipline to kind of help uncover some of that tacit knowledge, who's less immersed in that discipline. It's supported by existing, university groups, especially those tied to writing or teaching. And it's meant to be sustainable, so long-term, scalable, and sensitive to changes within departments. As faculty fluctuates, student enrollment fluctuates, courses change, and so on. AI being a popular topic right now, of course, the writing within departments may need to change to respond to AI and other disruptive technologies. So now Carolyn's going to talk briefly about the steps involved in this process.
Thanks, Melanie. So looking at the writing plan, this is really the central component or the heart of WEC. And all of the same steps are used for all writing plans across any faculties, any institutions. they are unique to the faculties and the units that make them. And so usually when the faculty and the writing specialist are creating these plans, they're usually done during already scheduled faculty meetings. And it's very flexible for departments that have courses that don't tend to have an order, a set order, but also work for departments that do have a very set order for their courses. So as Melanie mentioned, the writing specialist works with them, and in our discussions with some professors, but also throughout the literature as well, many have discussed that they don't feel comfortable teaching writing in their faculties. And so that's where the writing specialist can help. And so, like Melanie said, they can help them navigate the discussions that they're having within, through working with this writing plan. So they can ask clarifying questions, and they can ask about discourse features in the discipline and so on. So we'll walk briefly through the writing plan. So you can see here that it's a series of 5 steps. And in the first step, there are characteristics of writing in the discipline. So this is basically where the faculty will define and describe what writing looks like in their discipline, and what characterizes communication in their discipline, because of course we know that that will be different across the disciplines. In the second step, they look at the writing abilities that they expect of the graduating majors once they finish their programs. What do they want students to be able to do? How do they want them to communicate and write by the time they graduate? For the third step, when and where in the curriculum or in the curricula, they're going to introduce the writing abilities. So this is where the group will discuss where writing instruction currently occurs within the curriculum, and where they want it to occur or where it could occur. And so they examine the curriculum and try to align writing skills and competencies within those courses throughout the entire program. So it could include, what kind of writing instruction they want to include, and therefore also the kinds of writing tasks and assignments that they would add in as well. And through this step as well, they can also have a look and see if there are any inconsistencies or gaps. And this is maybe where some more instruction needs to be added, or where other tasks and writing activities need to be. The fourth step there, methods and criteria to assess. So they're going to look at how they want to assess the student writing. How are they assessing the writing already? How would they prefer to assess some of the writing that they have? And so they could base their criteria for the writing plan on what they have that already exists, or something that they would like to add to that. And then finally, for the fifth step, what supports do they need for implementation? So these could involve things like maybe planning workshops, and that could be for the faculty or for the students. Maybe they want to create some more instructional materials that they could use, or even, seeking other supports throughout the university, like people like Melanie Reed, the Writing Center, those kinds of things. Once the plan is finished, then they send it around to the department's faculty to see if there are any further comments that the faculty would like to make. And then once the plan is approved by everyone, then it can be implemented. So if we look at, sorry, to my page here. I think that, these examples here of writing values in these 3 disciplines shows one of the many strengths of WEC. This is really a bottom-up approach. It's starting with the faculty, and they really have a say in what their curriculum will look like. How can they integrate writing into their curriculum? And, they can help their students become stronger writers. So I guess it kind of gives a greater sense of excitement, to the faculty, because they're the ones who are creating and implementing writing throughout the courses. And so they really do have that greater ownership over that. And that's much different from other kinds of initiatives where it's more of a top-down approach. They might be coming from writing-enriched programs, might be coming from upper administration. It might be some kind of writing unit outside that will suggest these kinds of writing programs for the university. However, sometimes these approaches don't always accept these values, maybe not recognize the differences between the disciplines. And so again, you know, we can see that each of the disciplines is going to communicate in a different way, but also have different values in the way that they communicate as well. All right, so there are many ways in which this program can be adapted in different institutions, and we don't actually have to go too far to find a Canadian example. So we can see here that the University of Toronto, Mississauga has Writing Development Initiatives program. And this is actually an application-based program that for any projects that they have there for integrating writing instruction into programs. And so this these initiatives can help instructors with their assessment design, any instruction that they need help with, or any other activities. So, you know, anything that will allow instructors to add more writing into their courses. So the support primarily, in their case, is for TAs. And that will allow, obviously, for more writing assignments, which is always good, but something that a lot of faculty complain about, that they don't have enough time to do. And also, of course, giving more feedback on the writing as well. And in this case, they have a 7-hour TA training program on writing pedagogy itself, which I think is just so exciting. All right. Now, another example of how this program can be adapted is by using embedded writing tutors. And the University of North Carolina, Charlotte is actually one of many universities that use embedded tutors. At the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, that's actually part of their communications across the curriculum program. So what they do is they hire senior students from their programs that will help in these initiatives, and they work as peer writing tutors. And so this can look different in different institutions. Generally, the writing tutors will meet with the faculty at the beginning of the semester and maybe a few more meetings during the semester to get an idea of course objectives, assignments that will happen in the courses, and so on. And the students, and the tutors also, they may even join the classes. So sitting on the classes, they may be able to help with any writing tasks that are happening in class or any writing kind of activities. And of course, like they would do at normal writing centers, they could sit down with the students one-on-one to give feedback to the students on the writing that they're producing for their courses. Another really important aspect to the embedded writing tutors, of course, is that they connect as a liaison between students and between faculty. So sometimes if the students aren't truly understanding what they're expected to do for an assignment, the tutor can, you know, talk with the faculty member and let them know that the students are having some difficulty, which would allow the faculty member then to maybe do some more discussion in class or make their expectations a little bit more clear.
So thanks, folks. Those are just two examples of ways this sort of model has been implemented at universities that we felt were both appropriate for our context here. The Writing Development Initiative is helping departments recognize the kind of curriculum work that needs to take place where they want to make changes or may need to make changes, and also the writing tutor approach. We see this as kind of a proactive project. We're thinking about the way writing is currently taught here. You know, in a lot of cases, students complete their CRW courses, but they're not receiving a lot of explicit instruction beyond that point. And in light of, you know, changes that are happening with writing across the country, you know, that may not be a sustainable approach. We may not be able to provide that level of instruction long term. So what can individual departments do to kind of provide a safety net for students should changes occur to those courses? So thanks very much for your time and questions today.
Thank you so much, you two, and we have about 5-ish minutes again for questions, queries, suggestions. Anyone?
It's hard to conceptualize how you would, are you approaching, like, it's not a program that you're trying to develop. Like, have you started approaching
So
different departments to inquire about how this might?
So
I'm just curious.
it's a great question. So in theory, it should be department driven. So they should want to do this. So we don't want to sell this to anybody.
Yeah.
And we have just started working with HSS has been recognized. They want to take this on. So we're in the early stages of that development. But it's not fully a program we offer at this point in time, but a capacity, a thing we recognize as should be taking place. Develop, but when they
We just kind of want to explain, what the program here, let's not call it program
Yes,
initiative, what it is, just so that people can think about it. And if they feel that it's something that they could introduce into their program, then, we could certainly sit down and chat about it. But yeah, it's not something that we're.
I think, in both of our roles, at Writing Center and then my work with faculty, we hear instructors saying that, oh, my students can't write, they should know how to do this, and they shouldn't, they haven't been taught, why should they know how? So it requires all departments, all disciplines, all faculties, I think, to look a little more interiorly at how are you currently teaching writing across your program? And then most recognize it or not, really. They get those first C or W courses, there's a lot of writing assigned throughout, but there's not always a lot of writing instruction taking place. And this model is one way that, it's a tragedy of the commons. It's everybody's job, so nobody's doing it. So, and this is one way to kind of remedy that.
I heard that, like, I had a meeting with someone in biology the other day who was interested in using a fusion module, and I said, like, I can recommend you use this, or this one, but I hesitated to recommend a couple more because I thought I have no idea what sort of writing output someone in biology is feeling.
Right? Yeah. So that's where their expertise comes in, and it's not about us saying what writing should be happening, but helping faculty draw that out, because a lot of the literature shows that when you become so immersed in your discipline, it's often hard to kind of articulate what those values are, and they become invisible to you when they're your everyday bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what it means to write in biology or engineering or so on, but I can't help other faculty see that in.
Yeah. And, it is, I think a lot of people too kind of get stuck on the idea that writing is essays. And so that's an HSS thing. So, but, we saw some of the values there. There's writing in all faculties, but we've had students come to us and say, oh, we don't need the Writing Center anymore because we finished our English CRW courses, and they don't know how wrong they are, So this is one of the advantages to this, is that they can see how they need to communicate in the field that they've chosen to be in, so that when they're out of university, they know how to communicate appropriately, So, yes.
Yes, please.
This idea, because just as a dean in medicine, I see that this is an equity issue, right? So students who can't at the graduate level write to the end point of their dissertation take longer, they pay more for their tuition, they get less motivated. It's just a terrible cycle to watch. So yeah, fantastic. Think about this, how to integrate it.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank all 3 groups of our presenters. That was